you love your wife, you love your family, you love your kids, you love your job. If you just like your job, is that good enough for you? That's not a great situation. We all have limited time on this planet. People want to make the most of it, because a lot of people get caught in that lull of, I like what I do and it's easy, but Are you inspired by it?
Welcome, everyone, to the Road Less Traveled show. This is a show about people that were successful in a previous career and left that career to go down a different path. I'm your host, Richard Coyne. On today's show, we're so pleased to have Chris Seveney with us. Chris, welcome.
Thanks, Richard. How are you today?
I am doing excellent. Fantastic. Really appreciate you joining the Road Less Traveled show. So, Chris, if we could kind of just begin, maybe you just give a little bit of your background, kind of what you're done in your past, what your career has been previously to what you're doing now.
Yeah. So I'll start with what I'm doing now and kind of work backwards. Today, I run company Seveney Investments, where we're raising $150 million through Regulation A and Regulation D funds that invest primarily in distressed mortgage notes, which is a very niche business that most people have never heard of. I've been doing that for about 6 years and left my W-2 job last year. When you talk about the road less traveled, it's interesting when, coming on, because I started as an engineer, graduated college as a civil engineer, worked for a general contractor for 15 years, then went on the development side and was always very successful in my career. I started managing projects in my late 20s, which back in that day was a feat if anyone could manage their own projects before they were 30. Then when I went on development side of things in my mid 30s, I was, at a director level overseeing, commercial, office, residential, new builds. And, I was working for a family office kind of developer at, top floor, cushy corner office, all glass, and spent 5 years with them. And, life was good. I was able to, balance my personal life with my work life. And, I got kind of caught in that, that road where things were just going okay. Things were going, but they were going good. And, did I like my job? Yes. But did I love my job? No. And that's what got me to, leave my W-2 a year ago to start this new venture that we have going on.
Very nice. Very nice. So you mentioned distressed mortgages. So are they in certain areas or across the country?
Right now, so we bought loans in 40 plus states. In the states we haven't bought in, North Dakota, South Dakota, Alaska, Hawaii. I mean, that's 4 right there. So typically we've pretty much bought in most of the states. Our current portfolio right now is in just under 30 states. There's states we like and there's states we don't like. Sure.
That makes sense. So, I think everybody's probably familiar with the concept of a non-performing mortgage, where basically somebody's just not paying the bank. So are you buying from the banks?
We're primarily buying more from larger funds.
Okay.
We have bought some from the banks. And when people think of you're buying from the banks, similar like buying, real estate directly from the banks, the banks are not, banks don't they're typically not the ones that manage your distressed debt because they're just not built to do that. Mm-hmm. And what they'll do is they will work with a third party company that does a lot of M&As, and they're called whole loan traders, that they'll end up taking a pool of loans to put out and they'll sell it through that trading company is typically where we see them and how we buy them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So obviously because they're non-performing, you're buying them at a discount. So, but with non-performing, how do you make money?
Yeah, great question. And what we like to tell people is similar, like if you're buying a dilapidated property, you're buying it. How do you make money on it? Well, with the property, you try and rehab the property to increase its value. For us, we're not rehabbing the property. We're trying to rehab the borrower. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to get that borrower on a modification, a new payment plan, get them paying again. So we get that cash flow coming in the door. Mm-hmm. Then once we get that cash coming in the door, then we can turn around and sell that back on the secondary market after about 12 to 18 months of reperforming at a premium.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. So you're not So again, you're trying, like you said, you're trying to rehab the borrower. You're trying to, in a way, you're helping people, trying to help them repair their credit, help them stay in their homes, kind of thing. I mean, but I guess, is it that you may have to foreclose on some, just given the non-performance?
Correct. Now, when we talk about non-performing, most people think that if they miss a mortgage payment, that the banks are going to come, breaking down their door like the FBI and throw them out of their house. The average loan that we have that's been delinquent, probably 5 years. So, we're not talking 30, 60, 90 days here. We're talking years. And yeah, you're right. We do foreclose on about 10% of our portfolio. Mm-hmm. It was much greater back in 2018, 19, because everyone knows what happened in 2020. And, also in the world, but also in real estate. Real estate prices have shot up and inventory has shot down. Right. So most people now understand that, well, I don't want to get foreclosed upon. So they'll go the bankruptcy route so they can restructure their payments and try and keep them in their home. The other thing I'll mention about it too is it's typically more profitable to actually work out a modification and sell off that loan than it is to actually foreclose on a borrower, believe it or not.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So gotcha. All right, got it. Now, real quick, if you also mentioned Reg A and Reg D.
Yep.
I'm familiar with Reg D because we have a fund ourselves. It's under Reg D 506C. Yep. But if you would, maybe just elaborate for our listeners to kind of distinguish a little bit between Reg A and Reg D, and then obviously sort of what your approach is.
Yeah. So most people are more familiar with, you said, the Regulation D 506C, which is exemption from the SEC that you can raise money from accredited investors and you can go out and advertise on that deal. So we have a Regulation D. Then the Regulation A actually requires SEC qualification. So it's, basically you do submit to the SEC and get qualified. They call it like a mini IPO. The benefits with that is you can raise money from accredited and non-accredited investors. Okay. Now, the downside is, you have SEC reporting where you have to, submit your audited financials, semi-annual reports. It's not as much as a public company, but, it costs, $100,000+ to get this thing set up. And then the ongoing costs every year with, attorney and accountants that, you have as well. So what that does is it allows us to, when you think about it, open the entire pool. And one of the reasons why, when we invest in distressed mortgage notes, we like to do that as well is, you have syndications where, you might take $30 million and buy a $100 million property, and because of leverage. Now, we are the bank, so we don't take leverage. So our returns typically sometimes cannot compete with the multifamily, because of the leverage, which has the risk. So when we're trying to compete with somebody with $100,000 and they see Richard's, multifamily deal that can get a 15% return, and they see ours, which can get a 10% return, where do you think people are going to look to? Mm-hmm. We like to look at it as, a lower risk profile than other mm-hmm. assets, but also by opening it up to the entire population over 18, it also gives us an advantage.
Okay. Got it. And this Reg A is the non-accredited side. The Reg is this the crowdfunding side CF Reg A CF? Is that
no? It's just Regulation A. There is a Reg CF that allows to raise up to like 5 or 10 million. Regulation A allows you to raise up to 75 million per year. We have 75 million in each fund. Okay,
gotcha. All right, very cool, very nice. Well, appreciate you giving that insight into. Not only your business, how it works with the distressed mortgages, as well as the Reg A and Reg CF or Reg D. So good stuff. So Chris, maybe back to your construction days, your civil engineering days, if you would. Is there a funny story you can share?
Oh man, I've got many funny stories I can share. I'll go back to building condos. Actually, is probably what truly got me out of wanting to get out of the business. We were building high-end condos, and I literally had to answer questions. So these condos were, starting at $1 million plus up to $5 million. This was a decade ago. So, today they're, probably, worth significantly more. But literally we would respond to complaints such as, The dishwasher had a red light that shined on the floor. I don't like it, which is, of course, the dishwasher when you can't see the controls. They had Sub-Zero and Wolf appliances. They didn't like the fact that the Wolf took 15 minutes to heat up to its proper temperature. It was the dual flush toilets, and people wouldn't hold the button down long enough. I actually had to get a letter from Kohler, the toilet manufacturer, on how much a toilet can hold. I kid you not. It was crazy, some of these things that people would work on. And then another unique story is I'm from the Northeast. So in the Northeast, everything's in Boston, all union built. And this is not first off, this is not a knock against unions, but you need to understand union rules because the quality of work is excellent. But we're building residential, and how do you install? I always joke with people, how do you install a microwave? Everyone says, how many people does it take to install a light bulb? How many people does it take to install a microwave? And the interesting story is, and this was when in the early 2000s, when the unions were also starting to restructure because there's so much housing going on, and they were really starting to fight for what it is they do. Mm-hmm. So you have a Teamster who's not affiliated with the AFL-CIO, which is, the big union organization. So they could they couldn't even drive on the site. They would drive to, the gate and have somebody basically bring it to the edge of the truck. They'd have a laborer go take it, bring it to the elevator hoist, which had a hoist operator that stood there and just controlled the elevator all day long, going up and down the building. And then once it actually gets into the unit, you have the laborer has to unpack it, but then you need the carpenter to connect it to the cabinet. You need the electrician to plug it in. Then you need the HVAC guy to connect the ductwork to it. So typically when you go to your house, it's like, okay, and say it's a hood or a vent, you just have one person do all of that.
Yeah.
And think about it. And this is, again, 20 years ago when each person's making 75 to $100 an hour. You'd have to have 3 people standing there to install one microwave.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've done it myself where I've installed underneath the cabinets where, you can do it yourself. Oh man, that's crazy. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Certainly I've heard some of those stories before as well. My home in Atlanta, when I lived there, this is a good long time ago. It was a neighborhood of not the starter homes. It was kind of like the next step, but not the jumbo homes. Yeah. So really nice places, and the developer was a guy in Atlanta who actually built apartments, and he decided to branch out into residential, and this was his first and last residential neighborhood for actually people who own the homes. And the reason he figured he did not like all the pushback he got because people who owned the home actually cared if the walls were straight. Yeah. cared about certain things that to make sure they were done right. But a red light, really, somebody's going to complain about that? That's insane.
Yeah. I mean, that's just so. Yeah. I mean, the other great one is the wood floors and the discoloration, because once they move their carpet, of course, it's a different color, and it's like, well, your wood floor is defective, and it's like, no, that's what happens to wood floors when they get sunlight, that they they lighten up and or darken, and and then where your rug is going to be different. Right. They didn't like that, and they want us to come in and refinish the entire floors again.
Oh my God. But again, that's years later. So, how long does the warranty last? Come on. That's ridiculous.
12-month warranty. The challenge is, in some of these larger buildings that you're doing, you phase them.
Right.
So, you're turning over floors at a period of time. So you might be there, you'll be there for 3 years. And after the first year, you're starting to turn units. So it's like you're a perpetual maintenance person. And if anyone ever develops condo buildings, and you're the developer or you're involved in a project, the one thing I would absolutely tell you to do is never live or own a unit in that building. Otherwise, you'll be eating dinner and you'll have 10 people waiting outside your door, knocking on your door saying the water's not hot enough or the toilet doesn't flush or whatever the case may be.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy. Wow. So you kind of touched on this high-end condo experience as something that really said, you got to do something different. I guess, is that kind of the deciding factor? You actually earlier you mentioned that you were just sort of like, doing a job, but you weren't in love with the job? Is that kind of what led you to say, listen, I'm going to make a change?
Yeah. So it caused a change. So I got burnt out doing the condo. So I went to go work for, I'll call it a family office, that, kind of considered real estate a hobby. They owned, $3 to $4 billion worth of real estate, but they were doing a lot of philanthropic events. So I was overseeing all of their portfolio, and they were doing a little bit of new construction, but they own many buildings throughout Washington, D.C. that I was doing a lot of capital projects on and overseeing a lot of that work. And while doing that, it was not work that was super challenging. It was interesting, but not challenging. I had a team that could help me. And the company, unlike a developer who needs to build a product to sell it to continue to make money, this family just, truly, they didn't need the money. They were in basically preservation mode. So like your goals and everything every year were just like, let's try and get this done, or what are we going to do? So it was still construction or managing and developing. I enjoyed the work, but I was kind of caught in that lull of my job got easy. And you get caught and it's like, okay, this is actually pretty good. I'm making great money and everything, but I'm the type of person where I can't sit down for more than 5 minutes. And after a few years of doing that, I finally spoke to my wife and said, hey, look, this is what I want to do. And then it took us several years to come up with that plan and meet the requirements of that we agreed to, because anybody who goes out on their own, you just don't want to quit and basically, what am I going to do? I'm an engineer. So I had everything planned out, how much money we had put away, how much are the savings, what are we going to do? Every step of the way, completely mapped out. And of course, the map, looks like a straight road and it never goes like the straight road. Yeah. And at least you know what that end game is and how to get there.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, I can see that, definitely if you're wind up, you're type A personality, you like to accomplish things. And if there's just, it doesn't seem to be a compelling deadline to get those things done. And really they're just sort of like, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Well, we're preserving capital. We don't need to do that project. Yeah, that's just not going to be satisfying in the long run. So,
and the challenge I see with a lot of people is, when you're younger and say you're making 50, 75 grand a year, it's much easier to go make that jump or go take that risk. I'm married. I have 2 kids, one starting college, and I was making a few $100,000 a year. That's a very different, discussion and profile of, well, if something doesn't work, getting back into the workspace, I can still get a job, but it's not going to be as easy as somebody who's got 5 years experience and, could have their pick of jobs in today's market.
Right. Exactly. So Chris, as you started shifting over really into Seveney, were there some obstacles you had to overcome?
Most of them were myself.
Okay.
And, when I was still working, I was managing some smaller funds and building my own portfolio. And I'm the type of person where I think I can do it all. And I was doing it all. And what you realize is it's great that you can do it all, but in coming from a person who played a lot of sports, the sum of the team is great, is greater than each individual part. And it took me a long time to bring on somebody to first help me, who's now my business partner. And now I have a team of 10. And now I kick myself in the, thinking, man, I wish I would have brought this team together 3 years ago, not a year ago.
Yeah. That makes sense. So Chris, can you think about, again, really, as you mentioned, you were still doing your W-2 job as you had started your company, Seveney, and eventually you were able to turn it off and leave the W-2 and go do this full time. But what was kind of maybe your first victory that you can really say, yep, this is it. This is going to work. All that engineering plans that you laid out in terms of how to get there, it's working. It's gonna happen.
I don't know. It's tough to pinpoint one component. There's so many wins, but I think the one that kind of really gave me the confidence was I'd started buying assets with my own money and then started doing some individual joint venture deals one-on-one with people. And then we had an opportunity, and this was about 4 years ago, where it was a portfolio of loans for about roughly $1 million. and to buy, and it was a screaming deal at the time. Like I was looking at this and like, oh, grand slam for what they wanted to, or should have been. And I'm like, okay, I got to find a way to buy these. Mm-hmm. And I did it through a 506B. And I had already had the attorney draft the documents 6 months ago, and they were just literally sitting on the shelf. Mm-hmm. So because I was like, if this day ever comes, I want to be ready, and kind of pre-planned, and went out and raised $1 million in 2 weeks. And and then bought this portfolio, and it ended up being a unbelievable, portfolio. Did excellent. A lot of them were performing loans. We could buy at non-performing rates, essentially.
Okay.
So that first portfolio went awesome. And that got me the confidence of, wow, I can do this. I never thought I couldn't, because I was used to managing, a $100 million construction project, which is, very challenging. And so I always thought I could do it, but you always still have that sense of, if it's your own company, it's different than working for the big guy, or big woman, if that makes sense, because you have a lot more responsibility.
Yeah, makes sense. So actually, if you would just elaborate for a moment on the shift, again, kind of going from construction management, project management, mm-hmm. to all this to mm-hmm. non-performing loans. It mm-hmm. doesn't seem like a straight line. So how did you kind of go from that to this?
Yeah, great question. And I joke when I talk to people, I say, I blame my wife. So the reason why I say that is, first, I love my wife to death. She is awesome. And she's the one that, now got me doing what I love. But we built our primary residence in 2013. We acted as a GC, perfect timing, ton of equity in that. We took out a line of credit. We started buying some property in the DC area that needed some rehab, and we'd rehab it and then turn it into a rental. Mm-hmm. But after a few of those, having young kids, we were spending our entire weekends at these properties. My wife looked at me and says, we can't do this anymore. And I was like, kind of moral loss, on that. But I'm like, okay, what else can I do? And I was actually ticked off because I didn't know distressed mortgage note investing existed until I started figuring out what I could do. And then I realized you can do it pretty much from anywhere in the world, at any point during the day. And that was the key, because I was still working. My wife goes to bed at, say, 9:30. So I used to call myself the midnight to 2 investor. If you go to bed, I would spend my evenings educating myself and then buying and managing my portfolio. The other thing that I did is, I always loved finance component to it. Mm-hmm. I also went back to school, got a master's in real estate finance at the same time, to really understand portfolio management and, asset management and multiple asset management. Because when you buy one asset, it's okay, I know how to manage that asset. But when you have 50 of them, it's very different. So I went back to school and got a master's in that as well. So that's kind of how the road got traveled there.
Okay. I like it. Nice. So more recently with your company Seveney, is there a humorous story that you can share?
Oh man. So I've got lots of humorous stories. I'm usually the one who's the brunt of all jokes within the company. So, and the reason being is, I am the most senior within the company. But also my co-founder, Lauren, when we were building the team, she's in Santa Barbara, California. So we're in basically both coasts. Yeah. So I built like the asset management team out. She built all the investor relations team out. And when we end up building the entire team out, we're a team of 9 right now, and I'm the only man. So I'm working with 8 women in real estate, which is actually very unique. And, the interesting part and story behind that, though, is what I found is on the distressed mortgage note side, when I reached out to people I knew in the space, and you can see this a little bit in real estate sometimes, some of the male egos would get in the way. Sure. Where somebody's like, I want to do it myself. And I'm like, okay, you can come, want to come be a part of it. It was very interesting from that standpoint of, how we built the team. So the other thing is, I'm very big on, everybody being a part of the team, but also trying to work with people. Like every one of our team members has a walking treadmill, for example, to work with. So really that collaboration, I'm not sure about any, and on the loan side, for some humor stories, Now, we've had borrowers who are behind and have told us the only thing you're going to get from this property is the ashes, which, because they, were going to be foreclosed upon, and they end up stepping up and making a payment. But we have had multiple homes burned down the day of or the day before foreclosure, which we insure the properties. So it's not a loss for us. And one other, it's just they come to my mind. We did have a deceased borrower show up in court. Oh. That is probably the most unique story I've heard. And on these cases, we don't go, we have our attorney go, and then we ask them to report back. And then, the attorney, which, the attorney used another attorney, who's local to the area type thing. Yeah. He said, hey, how'd court go? He's like, oh, the borrower showed up and said they want to get on a repayment plan. I just took a step back and went, wait a second. The borrower's deceased. And they're like, oh, he showed up in court. I'm like, okay, this is new one to me. What it was is his son, who had the same name, showed up in court, said he was the father because he wanted to keep the house, but they were like 7 years behind at that instance. But, so that was probably one of the more interesting stories when I get the email that he showed up, came back from the grave.
You would think that somebody wouldn't be that stupid, because basically that's fraud that he just did. He just committed fraud. I mean, and it's not that hard to go figure out, okay, Roy Jones Sr., SSN, date of birth, blah, 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 Roy Jones Jr. It's two different people. Yeah. I'm actually, named after my father. He was the third. I'm the fourth. And, the credit bureaus years ago had us together as one person. I'm like, come on, really? Let's wake up here, guys. Holy Moses. You said something, said something right before that made me, I was going to say something. I forgot what it was.
But we were talking about burning down properties.
Oh, well. Yeah. So, in that circumstance, you're protected because, of course, you've insured the property. But does an arson investigation wind up launching in some of those cases?
Good question. A lot of times don't know. And I remember we had one. It was in Chunky, Mississippi. And I remember buying this. I'm like, what am I doing buying something? The name just Chunky. That the day before foreclosure, basically, they burnt the house down. Inside the house, there were like three gas cans, like inside the house, which started it. Oof. We know who did it, and so forth. We know what happened. Now, did they ever prosecute or investigate? Once it goes to that side of things, we don't follow that. We just work on, insurance company, we get our payout. Then what do we do? Okay, this one, we'll turn around, we'll sell the property, and from that standpoint. And then there's no more, whether they convict somebody or not, typically doesn't impact the insurance component to it.
Got it. It's not the owner's insurance company that would investigate the owner's claim because they don't own the property anymore. It's been foreclosed on. It's a new owner due to the foreclosure, and your insurance company. So there's a line there that you can see is clearly nothing to do with you. So therefore your insurance payout is legit. And again, like you said, unless somebody got hurt, the local authorities probably aren't going to do anything about it. So
the other one we had was a house that the neighbor burnt it down, because what we heard is the two neighbors, the one neighbor was buying drugs or dealing drugs for the other, and then sold the drugs that didn't give them the money. So they burnt the house down. So then they basically rented a trailer and were living so they went back to the property and were living in the trailer in front of a burnt down house. The person then went and burnt the trailer down after the fact as well.
You can't make this up.
We've also had two borrowers who were convicted murderers. So one was a very wealthy gentleman who owned a concrete company that had some of his Goombas take the acid and concrete and basically dump his wife in it because he was having an affair with his secretary. She ended up living for a period of time to basically know who did it. But I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that if somebody's going to burn you with acid that's used in concrete and you have a concrete company, it doesn't take much to put two and two together.
Yeah.
So that person's been in prison for a very long time. And we had a loan on one of the rental properties that the sister was taking care of. And she's like, please just take this property away. So we ended up taking that. But
oh, man.
Yeah. It's kind of like watching an episode of Cops, if you ever watch that back in the day, but instead of, it's for like houses or that show Hoarders.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. It's amazing how dumb criminals are. And they wind up often, letting themselves, enabling themselves to get caught by the stupidity that they display. So crazy. So Chris, where are you today on your journey? Kind of where do you see yourself going?
So right now, great question, first off. And I just finished reading the book, The Buddha and the Badass and Vivid Vision, which are two great books to really start to put down where you think you're going to go or want to go, along with if anyone implements that EOS method of looking at your 1, 3, and 10 year. So we look at that as well. We're working to get our company to between 150 and 250 million. And within the mortgage note space, we feel that is a very niche space of there's a lot of people who might have 10 to $20 million funds and a lot of people that have $1 billion funds. So getting into that middle ground and being able to grow and manage and continuing to manage our assets, because a lot of the other funds that we speak with also outsource some of that management. So by keeping it in-house, I think it gives us that competitive advantage because we really go through every file and understand what's going on. For example, recently, last year, we bought 2 loans that were distressed, but they're on the market for sale and pending. And, we bought them and literally the borrower sold them a month and a half later. And we bought them at and this was rough numbers, let's say $1 million+ purchase that you got for 65, 70 cents on the dollar. Yeah. So in 3 months, you made, $250,000 on $1 million purchase, which, when I'm reviewing with the attorney, we couldn't figure out why are they selling these loans? It made no sense. And, we basically come to the conclusion because we see this a lot of the files just get stuck in a file cabinet and people aren't watching them or they're working on other assets to manage and they just kind of lose status of it. And then once they start to sell them, they don't pay attention. Like, oh, this one's for sale. We don't care what's going on. Let's just sell it.
Yeah. Wow. But for people who are on top of their game and paying attention, there's money to be made there. So nice.
Yep.
Very cool. Very cool. So Chris, is there something that you do perhaps personally or perhaps through your company that you can share that you do to give back or in a way and to help people in some fashion?
Few things. One is I assist with running a scholarship for my late father and my late uncle who was killed in Vietnam, which goes to, it's called Seveney Scholarship, which goes to a graduating high school senior from our hometown. The other things, we do, along with trying to work with borrowers, of course, on their situations, within my own personal portfolio, it's much easier to do certain things versus in a fund because you have some fiduciary responsibility. But in some of my own personal assets that I've owned, as an example, we had a loan where it was a military veteran whose wife passed away. He had no family, couldn't afford the property. So what, we did with this one individual was we reached I'll call it a perpetuity lease where he pays me $1 a year for rent on the property and he pays the taxes on the property. And, every year he mails me a check for $1 with a thank you letter and so forth, because, he lives it's in 20 acres in Arizona. He's got 3 horses and he's like, what am I going to do with my horses? Like, where would I go and stuff? In that instance, it was a win-win for both parties. It's an asset that technically I own that, will appreciate over time, that I don't need that today. So when there's ways we can try and work with borrowers or work with people, that's something we definitely want to do. One of my people who work with me runs my asset management side. She runs a nonprofit. And one of the things we do want to eventually, as we grow, is start a housing nonprofit as well.
Okay. Very nice. Very nice. Good. So, Chris, is there something you've recently implemented to help your business grow? I mean, you mentioned EOS. Is there anything that you can briefly talk about? Maybe
Yeah.
something recent?
Yeah. So EOS is, something that we started implementing about 4 months ago, and mind blowing, because one of the things that EOS will make you do is not an org chart, but an accountability chart. And what you basically do is, fill out who's accountable for each task and kind of where that box fits. And what we realized was we had a lot of people who were dipping their toes into that task, but like not responsible.
Okay.
So when you walk through this process, you realize that there's a lot of inefficiencies because there's too many cooks in the kitchen. And then once you put it together and basically like, okay, think of a football team, you're the quarterback, you're the left tackle, you're the right tackle, you know what your job is, and you know what your job and assignment is on every single play. That's really kind of what EOS does, is it maps out that game plan for you. And for us, from an efficiency standpoint, people have gotten more productive, gives, of course, better work-life balance. Plus, it's allowed us to expand the company without adding manpower, which is also
Nice.
a benefit to the company.
Nice. So again, EOS Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's from the book Traction by Gino Wickman. Highly recommend it. It's definitely a great book. Certainly check it out. And I think they actually do consulting to help people implement EOS. Certainly you can do it on your own, but they also have a consulting arm, if I remember that correctly. So
correct.
Good. Very nice. Very nice. So Chris, what advice would you share with somebody who's considering making a path change?
Somebody mentioned this the other day when I was on a call in a group of people considering, like, do you leave your W-2? Do you go, what you do? And people, the best advice this person had is, most people, if you're married and you have kids and stuff, you love your wife, you love your family, you love your kids, you love your job. If you just like your job, is that good enough for you? Like, if you just liked your wife or, husband, is that good enough? Like, most people would say that's not a great situation. But why don't you treat your profession or your job the same way? If it's not something you love, figure out a way to go do something you love. Because at the end of the day, we all have limited time, on this planet, and, people want to make the most of it. So that's, probably the best, advice I've heard recently. And it kind of hit home. And I was like, that's exactly, because a lot of people get caught in that lull of, I like what I do and it's easy, but are you inspired by it?
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, exactly. You spend a large portion of your life. Again, the dynamics of the world have changed, where there's a lot more people working from home than used to be the case. But regardless, I've been a remote employee for 20 years, before I left and retired from my W-2 and et cetera. But anyway, but yeah, you're right. You got to enjoy what you do. You spend a lot of time there, you build some relationships with the people that you work with. So, don't do a job you're miserable with, you can't just, it's not a light switch. You don't just flip a switch and leave. You got to have planned out and laid out an approach that enables you to do that. But at the same point in time, enjoy something, do something you enjoy to so you're fulfilled. So very nice. Good. So Chris, what's the best way for people to reach out and find out what you're working on, what you're up to?
Yep. So best way to reach out is go to our website, which is 7einvestments.com. It's the number 7, the letter E, investments.com, or you can email me, chris@7einvestments.com. You can find me on LinkedIn and most social media platforms as well.
Okay, very good. Very good. We'll put links to the show notes in there for people to be able to reach out and catch up with you. So, Chris, we really want to thank you for being on the Road Less Traveled show. We appreciate your time, and thanks for spending some time with us. So,
thanks for having me, Richard.
Absolutely. So we also want to thank our listeners. Please continue to give us a 5-star rating so we can bring you more great content like our show today with Chris Seveney. And we also want to remind everybody of a couple things Park Capital Partners has going. First of all, we have the Park Capital Partners Fund, which is a 506c fund open today to accredited investors. Second, we have the Park Capital Partners Foundation, which is a 501(c) nonprofit that Bill and I created as a way that we give back. So quickly, how that works is, first of all, Bill and I believe the money donated should go to do its best work, which is to help others. So we fund the foundation. Second, we donate personally. Third, we donate corporately. And then finally, when investors invest with us, we make a donation to honor that investor to a pre-selected list of 15 different charities, including the charity to end homelessness, Feeding America, charity for Wounded Warrior, other charities, et cetera, in there. So please reach out, the Park Capital Partners LLC.com, parkcapitalpartnersllc.com. Love to have a conversation with you, and we'll stay in touch. And again, thank you for Chris for being on. Remember, folks, the road less traveled may be calling you. We recommend that you listen and take action. Thanks for joining.